The disappearance of Gabby Petito has recently been a topic of much discussion in the news and on social media. Sadly, her body was found a few days ago, but the events leading up to that and the whereabouts of the only named person of interest remains a mystery for now. Let's investigate. If you enjoy internet mysteries and generally disturbing content, feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this. I also have a Patreon and a PayPal, so if you're interested in supporting the channel, feel free to check those out, links will be in the description. Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie met in high school, though only began dating in March 2019, a couple of years after Gabby graduated. Things moved pretty quickly. Gabby moved in with Brian and his parents later that year, and in July 2020 they got engaged. Gabby's father noted in an interview with Dr. Phil that there were no big red flags in their relationship and that Brian seemed respectful. On the 2nd of July 2021, the pair left Blue Point, New York, where they'd been for Gabby's brother's graduation, and began what was planned to be a 4-month cross-country road trip in their van. They posted photos on Instagram and they both seemed to be enjoying their trip, no obvious signs of any problems. However, on the 12th of August, the pair were seen fighting in Moab, Utah. A witness called the police and said that Brian slapped Gabby, then they both ran up and down the pavement and Brian hit Gabby again, then they both drove off. In his written statement, he recalled that the pair were talking aggressively and that Gabby was punching Brian in the arm. There was no mention of him hitting her, despite that being the focus of the 911 call. It looked like Brian was trying to leave her and take her phone with him, but Gabby eventually got into the van through the window on the driver's side and said, "Why do you have to be so mean?" Police eventually caught up to the pair and there is over an hour of body cam footage that can be found on YouTube. The officer approaches the van and finds Gabby in the passenger seat, visibly upset. He asks her to step out and takes her away from the van to ask her what's going on. To cut a rambling story short, the pair had been arguing and Gabby felt bad and had apologised to Brian for being in a bad mood because she has OCD. As a side note, her father said that she has not been diagnosed with OCD and believes her use of the term was a hyperbolic way of saying she was cleaning a lot or that something relating to cleanliness made her feel anxious. Gabby also mentions that Brian tried to lock her out of the van, which is actually her van. The officer makes it clear that she is not in any trouble, but asks her to sit in the back of his car to calm down for a few minutes. He then asks Brian what's going on, who says that sometimes Gabby gets worked up, so he tries to distance himself from her by locking the car or walking away. Tensions have been rising due to them travelling together for over a month, and they've been arguing about Brian getting into the van with dirty feet. He has scratches on his face that he claims Gabby did when he was pushing her away, trying to calm her down, and they both agree she hit him because she was worried that he would leave her stranded. You can watch the whole interaction online, but it ended with the officers deciding not to charge Brian or Gabby for anything, but strongly recommending that they spend the night apart. So Gabby stayed in the van while Brian was driven to a hotel. The officers believe the incident was more of a mental health crisis than domestic violence. I assume they stayed apart for the night, but I'm not too sure what happened. Either way, the next day they both posted on Instagram as if nothing had happened. Since his second post that day, Brian hasn't posted anything since, and Gabby made 2 more posts, the most recent being the 26th of August. On the 19th of August, they uploaded a video on a YouTube channel by the name of Nomadic Static, which was created in 2013, but this is the only video on the channel now, so I'm not sure if there were any previous uploads that have since been deleted. The video featured various clips from their trip so far, and they both seemed happy. Who knows if they genuinely were, or if it was just an act for the camera. On the 24th of August, Gabby stayed at a hotel in Salt Lake City and FaceTimed her mother. This would be the last time she saw her daughter alive. Gabby made a phone call the next day and continued to text her mother until the 30th of August, when she sent a last message, "No service in Yosemite." 2 days later, Brian returned to Florida in the van without Gabby, and 10 days after that, she was reported missing by her family. Sounds like they weren't aware that Brian had returned without her. Neither he or his family made any effort to contact them. By the 15th of September, Gabby's van had been seized by police to search for evidence, and Brian was named a person of interest. It would be an understatement to say that he and his family have been uncooperative. They refused to speak to the police or Gabby's family, and Brian hired a lawyer who reportedly advised that he remain silent. Hiring a lawyer isn't necessarily suspicious in itself, but the lack of cooperation really doesn't look good. His girlfriend is missing and he's doing absolutely nothing to help, if anything only hindering the search. On the 17th of September, protesters gathered outside his home, and later that day his parents reported him missing, claiming not to have heard from him for 3 days. Also on that day, police spoke with a woman who claimed to have given Brian a lift on the 29th of August. She had posted about the encounter on TikTok. He offered her $200 for the ride before he even entered the vehicle, which was weird because it wasn't a very long journey and they were going that way anyway. Perhaps this was to make it memorable so it could form part of Brian's alibi. Less than half an hour after he was picked up, he noticed that they were heading to Jackson Hole instead of Jackson, so he got agitated and asked to be let out of the car. Another woman believes she may have seen Gabby's van sometime between the 26th to the 28th of August, and a man was acting weird. 2 more potential witnesses uploaded dashcam footage on YouTube from the 27th of August, showing a van that looks like Gabby's. As they approach the van, the back door closes. Another couple claimed to have seen Gabby and Brian leaving a restaurant in Jackson on the 27th of August. Gabby was crying and Brian was visibly angry and acted aggressively towards the staff. The disappearance has gained significant attention, not only in the news but on social media too. Over 1,000 tips have been submitted, and it seems that Brian has already been found guilty in the court of public opinion. No one had heard from Gabby in over 2 weeks at this point, and all hope of her being found alive and well was starting to fade. If something happened to her, it stands to reason that Brian at least knew about it, if he wasn't the direct cause. On the 19th of September, human remains were found that were later confirmed to belong to Gabby. One search sadly came to an end, as another intensified when the manner of death was determined to be homicide, and the main person of interest disappeared nearly a week ago. At the time of writing the script for this video, the exact cause of death hasn't yet been revealed publicly. I hear a full autopsy is scheduled for the weekend, but it'd have to be a massive twist to disprove the most popular theory, which is that Brian was somehow responsible. It is important to remember that this is an open investigation. As of now, Brian hasn't been arrested, let alone convicted, so even though he may seem guilty, we don't know for sure that he is, as there's no solid evidence to prove his involvement in his fiance's murder. That said, things don't look great. With the shifty partner, the social media aspect, and the idyllic life they portrayed appearing to be a lie, this is becoming somewhat reminiscent of the Chris Watts case. It just makes no sense that Brian would return home with Gabby's van but not Gabby, and make no attempt to contact her parents or to report her missing himself. Unsurprisingly, it's rumoured that Brian's parents are covering for him. Unless he came up with a good cover story, surely his parents would want to know where Gabby was too, considering she lived with them. They also failed to report Brian missing until they hadn't heard from him in 3 days, which kinda looks like they intentionally gave him a head start. They told police he headed to the Carlton Reserve, north of their home, an area he often visited to hike, but searches turned up nothing and some speculate that this was a distraction technique on the parents' part. If he ever did go there to hide out, it's unlikely he would have survived for long, considering the area gets flooded at this time of year, and there are a number of dangerous animals including snakes, panthers and alligators, which poses the question, what happened to him? He's either good at hiding or he's dead, which is absolutely a possibility. He may have taken his own life to avoid punishment, or gone on the run and somehow died in another way. Either way, all that running's done for him is made him look more guilty. Before Gabby's remains were found and the manner of death determined to be homicide, a theory that maybe seemed nearly as likely as Brian actually murdering her was that he just abandoned her somewhere. One of the officers who spoke to the pair noticed that Gabby appeared to have separation anxiety, and she said she believed Brian was going to take off in the van and leave her stranded. That's what the witness thought was happening when they saw the altercation between the two earlier that day. Can we just highlight for a second the audacity of this man though? It was Gabby's van, not his. It was her only method of travel, her only source of shelter, and Brian basically dangled it in front of her like a carrot in front of a donkey. I don't even care who owned the van, I don't care how bad an argument they had. If you're on a road trip with someone, you don't just leave them somewhere unless you both agree to that and you know that the person will be safe and has a way to get home. It sounds like Brian wanted space from Gabby, so if anything, he should have removed himself from the van and gone for a walk or something. I don't want to read too far into something that I don't have the full picture on, but I think the whole van situation is a massive red flag and says a lot about Brian's character. The possibility of Brian abandoning Gabby and her succumbing to the elements was ruled out when the death was found to be a homicide. At this stage, there is still a chance that he left her somewhere, then she was murdered by someone else, but Occam's razor would suggest that he was directly responsible, and he is in fact the only person of interest right now as far as I'm aware. Speculating on a specific motive seems like a bit of a stab in the dark right now, but we know the pair was struggling to get along due to them travelling together for so long. It appears that things got physical on both sides, as they were both seen or admitted to hitting each other. It's plausible that they had another fight that went too far this time. Perhaps Gabby was killed in a fit of rage. Gabby's friend did an interview in which she revealed that Brian was controlling and specified a time where he hid Gabby's licence so she couldn't go out to a bar with a friend. Another argument that turned into a physical fight, so it seems like they were used to dealing with their problems in that way. Right now we don't know if Gabby was killed in self-defence. I personally lean against that theory, but it seems that they were both violent to each other, and I can't stress enough that without more information we just can't say for sure. Going off witness statements, it seems to me that Gabby may have died on the 27th of August, possibly following the argument she had with Brian at the restaurant in Jackson. I think the dashcam footage, presumed to be of Gabby's van, could well have been shortly after the murder, and I can't help but wonder if her body was in the back of the van, waiting to be hidden, and that's why the door was closed when another vehicle was heard approaching. The sighting was in the same area that Gabby's remains were later found, so it would fit. Texts were sent from Gabby's phone until the 30th of August, but it's questionable whether she actually sent them. On the 27th, her mother received a text which read, "Can you help Stan? I just keep getting his voicemails and missed calls." Stan is Gabby's grandfather, but she never called him by his first name. It's possible this could have been a code for help, some even suggested it was a reference to the Eminem song Stan, but her mother does not believe that she sent it, or the text on the 30th about there being no signal in Yosemite, and it's certainly plausible that she was no longer alive by that point. Perhaps Brian sent that text to throw police off the scent, so they'd search for her in Yosemite as opposed to Jackson, where her remains were eventually found. What I don't quite understand is Brian's decision to hitchhike on the 29th, assuming the witness who picked him up is remembering correctly. It would make more sense if he made his own way back home, then he could return and make up a story about them breaking up and Gabby choosing to continue the road trip without him or whatever. But he was likely in the van in the dashcam footage on the 27th, and 2 days later he hitches a ride, then he goes back to the van at some point and drives it home. It would make a bit more sense if Brian reported Gabby missing. He could have claimed he was looking for a ride back to where he and Gabby departed, possibly after an argument, and that once he arrived he realised she was missing. But right now I can't understand some of the decisions he made. Whether he's guilty or innocent, many details in this case just don't quite add up. If you have seen Brian Laundrie since his disappearance, or if you have any information relevant to Gabby's murder, please contact the FBI. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Brian is responsible for Gabby's murder, or do you have a different theory? If you enjoyed the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Huge thank you to my patrons, whose names are on screen now. I really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next Thursday in a new video.